Well, good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN Sunday for Sunday, October 24th, 2021. We've got another great show for you this week, so sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of BRN Sunday. We're going to kick things off with a look at what's happening down on Capitol Hill, or up on Capitol Hill, or over on Capitol Hill, depending on where you are. Joining us on the line to help break this down, David Levine, Kevin Walsh. Both are principals with Groom Law Group, an employee benefits law firm based in Washington, D.C., and they're also known as the League at Legals. Gentlemen, great to talk to you as always. Thanks so much for stopping by this morning.
Thanks for having us on the show. It's always good to spend a weekend with you and with your listeners.
Great to have you, Kevin. And David, let's kick things to you. What's top of mind this week for the Eagles? I'm just going to call you the Eagles, not the Philadelphia Eagles, not the legal Eagles. You're just the Eagles.
Thank you, Jeff. We filed the trademark application, so we're all over that. And, top of mind when I woke up early this morning is, wow, it was dark. So 2 weeks from today, daylight savings time ends, which means it'll only be a little less dark. But after that, what immediately came to mind – yeah, go ahead.
So, David, would you say winter is coming?
I would say winter, at least 6 weeks of winter is coming, say it, Dave the groundhog. So given that, the second thought I had after Kevin asked me if I was a groundhog was that about something that's getting a lot of press. And inevitably, the retirement industry is a little bit like an echo chamber. One person writes a story and you get dozens of them. And this topic is one that's certainly gotten that recently. Fiduciary insurance. Because Kevin and I talk a lot about litigation. We talk about what's going on in the cases, the trends, more and more, the stuff that, a lot of people are interested in. Mm-hmm. But when you get sued, one of the first questions you immediately ask, or you think you might, is who's going to pay for it? And inevitably, the deep pocket that most plan sponsors especially turn to, and some service providers as well, is fiduciary insurance. Fiduciary insurance is different than directors and officers insurance. It's different than errors and omissions insurance, especially for plan sponsors. I'll avoid some of the weeds for our discussion today. But fiduciary insurance is its own breed. Is it sometimes part of your errors and omissions policy as like a rider? Yes. Could it be standalone? Yes. The key is, if you have concerns about insurance, you should say, do I have coverage for fiduciary breach claims? And that means asking your broker, working with your carrier to make sure, do I have that coverage? What's gotten a lot of press, which ironically has been going on for several years now. I think Kevin and I in 17 or 18, we started hearing a lot of this. Mm-hmm. You're getting people, when you renew your insurance, what you get is called an insurance application a lot of the time. Sometimes it's short form if you're renewing. In English, you're asked a bunch of questions about how does your plan operate? What are the features of your plan? And another layer of this is also, have you been contacted by certain plaintiffs' law firms? The reason why this is the case is, for years, fiduciary insurance was often a tag-along in many insurance products. It was part of there, but it didn't drive the premiums. But with well over 100 fee lawsuits brought in 2020 alone, what this has meant is that insurance carriers are paying out a lot of money to defend these cases. So now they ask a lot of details. Why is this important? As lawyers, we work with our colleagues a lot on this, our clients, because remember, what you put in an insurance application becomes part of your policy. Mm-hmm. It's a representation. You're making a statement. So you have to make sure that you've addressed it cleanly, because that's part of the contingency that gets you your coverage. In addition, what you're also seeing on insurance these days is different types of limits. Higher deductibles, retentions. I could get into the weeds. The key idea is, if you get a fee lawsuit, it might have been in the past, insurance might start covering you after the first $25,000 or $50,000. A lot of people, a lot of money in a lot of cases, even to start. But now, if you have plans, you could see $1 million retentions and carve-outs of certain types of lawsuits and fees. The important takeaways, and then I'll hand it over to Kevin to add some more color, is a couple things. First of all, remember your application matters. And it's important to focus on precision and accuracy in the application. Talk with your advisors, talk with your lawyers. Make sure you really focus about answering the questions that are being asked. Number two, it's understand what your coverage is. What does it mean? who can defend you? What are the panel firms? And that's self-serving for lawyers, I know. But also, what is your coverage? Those are important things to think about. Kevin, what's on your mind on this?
Thanks, David. Yeah, on my mind with this, I think you've hit on some of the key things, which are, I think the most important thing is to understand your coverage, and understand your coverage before you get sued, because once you've been sued, it's often too late to get coverage for that claim. And in this increasingly litigious, environment where we're seeing plan fiduciaries sued for a variety of reasons by, the same firms repeatedly, it really makes sense to, look at your policies and make sure that they're providing the coverage that you think they're providing, that they're actually providing fiduciary coverage and not simply other types of coverage. And then, as you said, David, when it comes to renewal time, look at the policy again, see if you're getting the same thing as last year. With a lot of the clients that I work with, the insurers may be willing to offer a similar policy in a renewal year, but the policies have been changing in ways that have not been favorable to the plan sponsor and the fiduciaries of those plans. So, take a look. It might make sense to, work with a vendor to determine if it makes sense to, get bids from multiple insurers, or just talk to your insurer. And then when you're filling in the application, I like to joke that at this point they've become so complicated there's a crossword section. I really haven't seen a crossword section yet. But, take the time to get it right, because if you end up using the policy, it's going to be very important that you're able to, get the coverage you're paid for. And the key to getting the coverage you paid for is to have an application where, you were honest and where you accurately described the coverage you were buying and kind of the conditions around your operations.
Gentlemen, if I could just ask a very quick question. You mentioned the importance of filling out the application honestly, truthfully, and completely. I kind of liken what you're describing to the cybersecurity insurance market, where for years and years and years, we didn't have any cyber claims. We didn't have a lot of breaches, or at least we didn't know about them. Now that things have really sped up and we have a breach all the time, there have been a lot of focus by insurance providers in this area to make sure that you get the contract, you get the parameters right around this. Would you agree that it's similar? Because litigation has run rampant, and there are claims against policies.
Yeah, I would say it is similar. It's similar in the sense that a few years ago there was a lot less who, what, when, where, and why are you doing the things you're doing from the insurer, and in both of those areas you're seeing a whole lot more detailed questions, and when you say fill it out truthfully and accurately. Sometimes with these forms, you have to actually go and gather information in order to be able to fill it out accurately. So it's important to, go to your Form 5500 or wherever you may have some of the information that you're going to need to enter, as opposed to just ballparking it.
Yeah. David, you wanted to make a comment?
Oh, no. Although it pains me, I concur completely with Mr. Walsh. And, think of it this way. I'm just going to leave it there. I concur with Mr. Walsh. Let's end the week on a high note. Okay.
Well, we're going to leave it there, gentlemen. Thanks so much for breaking this down. A very important topic, part of the building blocks of being a responsible retirement plan sponsor and fiduciary. Gentlemen, have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Thank you, Jeff.
Bye, guys.
Thanks. Always good being on. Bye.
Back. Now we're going to talk technology, consumer products, and a lot more. Joining us on the line, he is lead advisor, executive producer for 7 Investing. We're talking to Daniel Klein. Dan, thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jeff.
Always a pleasure chatting with you and getting your perspective on some things. So one story that was, I think, big headlines this week, there are a lot of things. We had the Apple relaunch of some new products and services, but Facebook, apparently it's rumored that they're going to be rebranding themselves. I wanted to get your thoughts about this. Facebook, I guess, has been around for how long, Dan? 12 years, 10 years, something like that?
Yeah, that sounds about right. It feels like forever, but I guess it's actually only like about to have its bar mitzvah.
So what does this rumored rebrand mean to you?
Nothing.
Tell us what you think.
Here's the thing. You want to meet me later for lunch at the Hut? Or maybe we could do some shopping at the Shack, and perhaps order some DVDs from Quickster. Like, for the most part, name changes are either terrible ideas or they do absolutely nothing. So here's the thing. So Google is now technically Alphabet.
Mm-hmm.
Does any person you know who's not writing in a financial space ever call the company Alphabet? Like, the reality is, you could say this is like a lipstick on a pig situation where you're trying to like pretty something up, but the reality is this is absolutely meaningless because nobody is going to call Facebook Metaverse or whatever they decide to call themselves. And so supposedly Mark Zuckerberg, who may change his name as well, who knows, is going to talk about this on
The Zuck. Sorry, go ahead.
Is going to talk about this on October 28th, though it could come out sooner. And I understand the logic. He wants to refocus attention away from the, pretty bad image that Facebook has. But I'm pretty sure if you, start calling Jeffrey Dahmer Jeff D, that's not really going to change things. Did I pick an evil enough person?
That is pretty evil. That is pretty evil. A lot of people who are listening to this may not remember Jeffrey Dahmer.
Famous serial killer. Just to give look. Here's the thing. I don't buy into this narrative that Facebook is some like inherently evil company and teenagers are being targeted. Like, look, there's been peer pressure and there's lots of venues to bully and have negative things go on in your life as a teenager. And I actually think Facebook has put, if not hundreds of millions, maybe even billions of dollars into sort of policing its platform, at least its English language platform. But I do sort of understand this whole spin into the metaverse, which is this like augmented reality sort of like pretend universe where apparently all going to go to board meetings at some point, even though I'm not on any boards, but apparently I'll be going to some of those. And again, like if this is just a subtle thing that's getting a lot of media attention, I guess that's fine. But the reality is nothing is going to shift attention away from sort of the ways Facebook is failing us and the ways they're not policing their content, the ways they're spreading misinformation. Mm-hmm. And I understand, look, I have a very close friend who just went to work at Facebook and he works on something that's on a very narrow basis focused on, really dealing with some of these problems. But the problems are really big, and calling it, F book or the book or whatever they're going to switch it to is really not going to change anything.
Yeah. It just seems odd to me, and there are rebrands that happen all the time, Dan. I look at, we both work in the financial services industries. Companies rebrand themselves. It's all in what's in a name, and I guess I don't. If your core business is still whatever you call this, social media, ad sales, and building this metaverse, which I want to get into in a second, what difference does the name actually mean? And I guess is this an attempt to run away from bad press or bad connotations about a brand?
I think it could be that. It could be sort of simply the really faulty Google logic where they said, hey, we're not just Google, like we do other things. Google is one of our products and we want it. And in some ways, we call Facebook Facebook, but Facebook owns WhatsApp. Facebook owns Instagram. That they own products that on their own would be giant companies. So there is some logic of having an umbrella name, but history shows, and I mean, I can't think of another example but besides Alphabet, but it doesn't really work. We still think of that company as Google, yep. And, nobody really cares that they also own Waymo. And that's, that's perhaps a less extreme example than WhatsApp, which is globally a really, really important product to a lot of people. But yeah, I think this is about obscuring the narrative, about taking some of the attention off of it. And I also think maybe Zuckerberg is naive enough to think that, oh, hey, my vision for this company is beyond being a social network. The name should reflect that, and then all of a sudden people are going to be on board. Look, I'm not sure I understand the metaverse. I'm not sure I buy into it. I think Facebook does a really good job as a platform to keep in touch with people you went to high school with and share photos of your cats and your kids. And I'm not entirely sure it needs to transform into something else.
Yeah, okay, Dan. I know you already admitted that we both don't understand the metaverse, but you probably have a better inclination about what the metaverse is versus what I do. So what do you know about this metaverse, and do we live in it, or is it an alternate reality for us?
Yeah, I think it's like an alternate reality from one of those movies. It's a virtual world, and in the movies, it's always to escape like how bleak reality is.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think the metaverse is going to be like sort of a digital universe where you put on your Tony Stark glasses or your headset or whatever it is, and you are in sort of a different world. I think it goes beyond the sort of like we're going to virtually attend meetings to like we're going to virtually go to a county fair together or whatever it might be. And I think those ambitions are really high. But the reality of that, I don't know. Like we've heard about AR and VR being a thing for, I don't know, 30 years.
Hmm.
And here's how I use AR. My car, my Toyota Prius, a 2014 Toyota Prius, has an augmented reality speedometer. It sort of pops up like in the ether in front of my car. That is really the only day-to-day use of augmented reality I have. And I own an Oculus, and I've tried different things, and I'm just not so sure that reality has gotten to the point that we want to be disappearing into a metaverse.
Yeah, it just seems like escapism. And I would argue, Dan, or ask the question to you, isn't some of the video games that we see today, Call of Duty, and I don't play any of these things, but aren't those really metaverses because you have an avatar that is your character and you run around and do whatever you have to do to complete the game? So isn't that really a way of, and you can, by the way, interact in multiple dimensions. So you can interact on the screen, you can talk as we're talking today, you can text or do whatever. So isn't that an example of a metaverse?
Yeah, and I think we're seeing some interesting blending of realities. Like, look, you could go to like a concert in Roblox, but I'm not so sure if like picking an avatar and going to see, I don't know, Ariana Grande in a Roblox game is all that different from me ordering like a Rolling Stones concert on pay-per-view.
Mm-hmm.
Like, sure, like I have to like do a little something extra, but it's really just a change of venue, and I'm not sure we're all that close to like where your work day is spent like in a virtual office where you're having virtual coffee with your actual coworkers or whatever it might be. And it doesn't work, virtual coffee. That's not a great that's not a great effect here. So yeah, and look, I don't want to poo-poo this. I don't want to pretend that the future's not coming, but I think this maybe is an overreach. I think this may be like 3D TV where there's going to clearly be some uses for VR and AR. There's obviously some very clear healthcare uses, some architecture uses. It might become an enhanced Zoom meeting sort of world where you all feel like you're sitting at the same table. But I'm not so sure that beyond video games that we're really heading to the future that Mark Zuckerberg thinks. And I wonder how much of his vision is cultured by the sort of unique reality someone like Mark Zuckerberg lives in. You may not know this, Jeff, but he doesn't live the same sort of like day to day that you and I do.
No, I don't. I think he lives in a compound somewhere. When you have that much wealth and you have that much influence, things kind of get served to you. But Dan, they're making. I'm just reading an article now on CNBC. Facebook plans to hire 10,000 people in the EU to build its vision. I mean, those are not small plans. These are big plans that they have. And I agree with you. I think that we're still a reality-based world, and we all like our experiences. And I can tell you, I've tried to dial back the social media stuff and the online stuff significantly because it doesn't serve me. It doesn't really serve a lot of value to me right now.
Yeah, I think it could be a mixed bag. I have a pretty big presence on Twitter, at Worst Ideas 7, but I think financial Twitter is largely a pretty supportive kind of a pocket of social media that's maybe different. And a lot of the people I interact with are people I at least tangentially know. Either they're friends or they're viewers or they're people and my Facebook is, as I said earlier, largely very surface, like, hey, here is a once-a-year picture of my child for relatives I'm not going to see. Here is where I happen to be visiting at this point, though right now putting travel pictures up is a little controversial, so I don't really share where I go. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of potential for this to be toxic, for this to be negative. I think there's a lot of potential for it to be good. Look, if you could have a meaningful, feels like you're sitting in the same room interaction with a friend who lives far away, or God forbid, a final interaction with a dying relative, so you could say goodbye. There are absolutely some positive uses for it. I just question, and again, this could be an old man not seeing the future.
Yeah.
But I question that we're all going to like disappear into our heads and our headsets the way perhaps someone with Mark Zuckerberg's personality believes that we will. Like, again, I see a lot of uses. I'm just not sure I see the metaverse as being the new social media.
Maybe you see the Marvel universe, not the metaverse. Dan, we're going to leave it. We're going to leave it there. Always a pleasure chatting about the virtual reality world, the metaverse world, branding, all things related to technology. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
I wasn't going to say it, Jeff, but I'm Iron Man.
You are Iron Man. Bye, Tony. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.
I'll see you later.
Welcome back. Now we're going to check in with Carl Sullivan, who is the North American Managing Editor for Flipboard. Carl, great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us again this morning.
Great. It's great to be here. Good morning.
Yeah, and I think last time you were on, about a month ago, we talked about what Flipboard is, and the fact that there are so many people out in the world on the planet curating content on the platform. So I guess my question to you, Carl, there's probably a lot going on the platform, but related to finance, related to what's happening in the business world. What's top of mind for you and the team at Flipboard this week?
Well, not surprisingly, we're seeing a lot of interest in stories about inflation
Yep.
as these headlines have popped into the news. We're seeing more and more consumers are interested in this, trying to figure out what's going on. Is it something they need to be concerned about? And if it is something they need to be concerned about, what should they do?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, I think all of us are seeing higher prices in terms of food, in terms of gas at the gas pump, just all of our basic goods. Anything you can pick up in terms of the rhyme, reason. I know we've talked with you on the network before about the global supply chain and the challenges there. I would think that has a lot to do with it.
That's right. I mean, from all the stories that I've been reading from our partners on Flipboard, it does seem that the supply chain is really the culprit here. I mean, those supply chain woes are still a big problem, and there's still pent-up demand from consumers for a lot of products, things that they've wanted to buy, and they've been on waiting lists, and it's just taking a long time for kind of the global manufacturing and shipping system to catch up with all that demand.
Yeah.
And it looks like that's going to continue for probably into next year, it looks like.
Yeah, I know we actually talked about the supply chain a few weeks ago on the network. I just saw a poll, and maybe this is picked up in one of the stories, that Americans are actually skipping meals because of the higher prices. And again, I don't know that I didn't see the sample size, right? I mean, a lot of these polls are like 1,000 people, and I don't know how credible that is. But if that's the case, Carl, I mean, then you've got bigger issues like nutrition, making sure that you've got all the right building blocks to keep yourself and your family healthy. So that would certainly be disconcerting if it were true.
Yeah, I haven't seen that particular poll, but I did just read a Wall Street Journal article on Flipboard about inflation and food particularly. And one thing that the experts in that article noted is that once grocery store prices kind of rise above 5%, that starts to impact consumer behavior. So far, there hasn't according to this article, there hasn't been a lot of change in consumer behavior. People are seeing the higher prices in grocery stores, but they're still going ahead and making their purchases. But as the inflation rises, then consumers do start to kind of rethink, and maybe they buy less, or maybe they start to look for cheaper products.
Yeah.
So I think we just kind of have to wait to see, what happens with that.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was, to me, this kind of ties into the whole credit card conversation, the buy now, pay later. If you're shifting, if you don't have the currency, the cash to cover an expense because it's gotten too expensive, and then you put it on your credit card, eventually things kind of tilt in the wrong direction. You can really get yourself in trouble and actually hurt yourself longer term.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, budgeting is always important, and I think consumers do need to be aware of higher prices and maybe just adjust their behavior as they can. I mean, sometimes there are certain products that they're essential. You can't go without them. So sometimes you just kind of have to bite the bullet and pay the higher price. Another thing though that we should think about is that wages do seem to be going up, which is a good thing. And we also know, we've talked about this before, the cost of living increase from Social Security for next year is also one of the highest that it's ever been. So there are some factors that are kind of helping people, whether they're working or are already retired, helping them make up for these extra prices.
Yeah.
It may not be quite enough, though. I mean, because I don't think, from what I've read, it doesn't seem that wages have quite kept up with the rate of inflation. So it's not a perfect solution.
No, I mean, I don't know what solution is perfect, but certainly consumers of all stripes are having to manage this. It's obviously challenging, especially if you're driving to work or you have children to feed. And it ultimately, if you're an employer, Carl, you can absorb some of that expense initially, but eventually you pass it through to the consumer, right? I mean, when it gets to a point where it's just too much, you increase your menu prices, you increase your store prices, and then ultimately we have to pay it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I don't know about you, but I certainly do enjoy going out to eat and not having to prepare my own cooking all the time. And one story that I read this week from the Associated Press pointed out that the cost of a meal at a full-service restaurant has jumped 5.2% in the last year. And a lot of that, it's because of rising food prices and especially meat prices, but it's also the higher wages that restaurants are having to pay because I'm sure you've seen, and I'm sure your listeners have seen, many stories about restaurants having staffing shortages. They're unable to hire the employees that they need. They're having to pay more money to get those employees in. And as you said, that often means that the prices on the menu are going to go up because they have to make up for those extra costs somewhere.
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right. I don't think this gets resolved this year. People are going to have to plan for it, budget for it, and hopefully as the supply chain kind of pivots back, I guess is the best word, and more goods are produced, then maybe we find some level of equilibrium somewhere where the price increases kind of abate. Carl, we're going to have to leave it there. Always a pleasure chatting with you, and I love the Flipboard platform. And again, my thumb is not getting too tired, but I might have flip thumb that I might have to get looked at from the doctor. Thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to having you back on again very soon.
Okay, thanks very much. Have a great day.
Thanks, Carl. Bye-bye. Well, that wraps up this episode of BRN Sunday. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to, drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the information in retirement, markets, technology, personal finance, so much more, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. We're back again tomorrow for BRN AM. We'll have a very special guest. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.